Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another live podcast episode. Dr. Maisha here. And um, I'm coming in really quickly because I want to talk a little bit about the things that threaten psychological safety. Now, if you know me, if you follow me, if you've heard me speak, you know that this is a topic I love to talk about. It's near and dear to my heart, and I talk about psychological safety often, what it is, the implications for it in our family relationships. I've talked about the implications for it in organizations, and I will continue to expound upon that. But what I really want to talk about today are two big things that maybe you don't think about, maybe people don't think about, that can threaten and that can undermine psychological and emotional safety. And those two things are lack of integrity, and I'm going to define that from this context in a moment, and incongruence. All right, which actually they're very closely intertwined and related. So let's talk a little bit about, first of all, this idea of integrity. And I think that when most people think of integrity, they think of this first aspect of doing what you say you're going to do, and that is definitely an aspect of integrity. It is really being standing on your word, as some people might say, right? Standing on your word and doing and whatever you say you're going to do, really doing that thing. There, of course, is another aspect of integrity, and that aspect is, so here's the thing: we often make promises, or we commit to doing things, and when we are able to do those things, when we're able to fill those things, that is an aspect of being congruent, or doing what we say we're going to do, standing on our word. However, as part of being human, sometimes things come up, right? Sometimes things come up. Sometimes, we need to change that promise. We need to remake that commitment. So there's this other aspect of integrity, that when we're not able to fulfill the commitment, that we get in communication about it as soon as we know. And then, share, like, okay, this is what I committed to, and I'm not going to be able to fulfill that promise. And so what can we then, repromise? What can you then, how do you restore that? What, for example, if it's something you were supposed to do on a schedule, how can we reschedule that? Or how can we still make that happen, or at a later date? So this is that's part of this concept of this context of integrity as well, right? It's doing what you say you're going to do, but if there's something comes up, you're not able to do it, you want to repromise, it's not an alignment with you anymore, that you get in communication. It may not be that you reschedule something. It may just mean, hey, you know what, this is no longer aligned. I'm not able to fulfill on on that promise, like I said I would, right? And so, and getting and when we say as soon as, it doesn't mean like, the minute before, the day before. As soon as and you're able to actually get in communication. And then the other aspect of that is, if you do break the promise, then restoring that integrity. And I'll give you an example. I was facilitating a session today, the day of this recording. Now, when it comes out, the time of this will be um, in the past. But I was facilitating a session today that I knew was supposed to end at a certain time, and it was the first day of the session, and there were all the logistics, and I forgot to set my timer. Now, part of being trauma informed is making sure that you honor, you that integrity piece, like you do what you say you're going to do. And part of that in this case was honoring their time. And so I was presenting, and a hand raised, and I stopped and I said, hey, you want to share. And the person says, oh, I just noticed that it's 103 and it was with, and I think on the schedule it was supposed to, well, 10:03, they were on the West Coast time. And I think we were supposed to end at 10 o'clock. And I realized that I had not set my end timer. And so immediately I stopped and I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. But, and that, at that moment, that had broken the integrity, like that had, my integrity of time had gone out. And so in that very moment I wanted to just take a moment to restore the space, right? Because being out of integrity, breaking your word, and especially breaking it over and over, it damages trust. And trust is a foundational component of feeling safe. And so in that moment, I said, you know what, let me take a moment to just restore integrity here. And I said, I know that this is supposed to end at, and it didn't take that long at all, right? It just takes less than a minute. This is supposed to end at 10 o'clock. I ended at 10:03. Your time is very valuable. That doesn't work. Here's what I'm going to be doing in the future to make sure that this does not happen again. And they were very gracious. They were very thankful. I could see heads nodding and smiles. And I said, with that, if there's anything anyone wants to say to be, complete. And there's some other levels of restoration integrity, which I could share in a different podcast. Um, but I wanted to get them off as quickly as possible. But I asked if there's anything anyone wants to share about this to help them feel complete. I welcome them. And I gave some space for that. I said, if not, thank you for the time today, and I'll see you on the next facilitation, which was 2 days from that time. And so, doing that, and then immediately, so this is to be congruent, which we're getting to in a moment. I went to my notes, my prep notes, and I put a big, note for me to set my timer. As soon as I log in, set the timer to notify me 5 minutes before we're supposed to end the session so that I'm aware we can start to wrap up. So I say that as, when we are not in integrity, we're not our word, we're constantly um, not doing what we say we're going to do, then it takes away, it undermines trust, which thereby undermines safety. And so um, if we're going to create safety in our organizations and our families, then and workability. So like really, when you say you're going to do something, people count on that, right? People count on that. They plan around that. They create schedules and their life around that. And so when you break a promise and you don't, and you break it sort of like spontaneously and without warning, it creates unworkability. So and if we thread the example of me going over time, perhaps these people had other meetings they had to go to, they had deadlines, they had work. Like it has an impact that can sometimes break down workability and yours and other people's lives. So we're talking about in our own lives, if there's we're breaking our word to ourselves constantly. We're breaking our word around our businesses. But if we're talking about it in interaction with others, the more you break your word, the more you undermine trust, the more people don't feel safe. So this is a huge thing that not everybody talks about that will undermine psychological safety and emotional safety as well. The other, which is very similar, is incongruence. And that's saying one thing and doing another. Now, we could say there's definitely an overlap, right? So there's the saying you're going to do something and not doing it, and not saying you're not going to do it, and not making a new promise, and not restoring integrity when you break your word, right? Like those things. or restoring integrity after you break your word and then continue to break your word over and over, and then just using it, restoring integrity as a band-aid. That doesn't work either, right? The continue I'm sorry or whatever. And I'm sorry is not actually a form of restoring integrity, by the way. It's acknowledging what you did, acknowledging the impact that it had, and making the promise of what you're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's the nutshell version of restoring, right? And getting the impact of the other person, asking them even. But in congruence, there's a little bit of a nuance in incongruence, because incongruence can entail the breaking of the word, but it also, incongruence is being one way in one situation and maybe being another way in another situation, or doing one thing, saying you're going to do something and then doing something completely different. Now, I'm not talking, when I say being one way in one situation and being another way in another situation, I'm not talking about code switching. That's a whole other topic. And in communities who have been harmed, it has historically marginalized and harmed. It's become a coping mechanism. So that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is your insides don't match your outsides, or your word doesn't match your actions consistently. Your words don't match your actions, right? The misalignment of what you say you're committed to versus what you actually do, or prioritize. A huge example is in the equity, the health equity, and the diversity and inclusion space, in the anti-oppression space, especially in 2020 after um, during the pandemic and after the murder of George Floyd. There were a lot of organizations that said, "Oh, we're committed to EDI, we're committed to, you know, equity and inclusion, all of these things, right? We're committed to anti-racism and anti-oppression," and they were committed to it outwardly on their websites or on their commercials or maybe on social media. And as you know, as you all know, I'm in this work. As we began to delve into some of these organizations' conversations, what we discovered is that people were saying things on the outside, and they were saying things to their employees, but they weren't actually doing the things that would reflect their commitment. That's incongruency, right? Saying you're committed to one thing, maybe prioritizing or doing another. And so when there's that type of incongruence, whether it be in an organization or whether it be in a parent-child relationship, or whether it be in a intimate partner relationship, or whether it be in a friend relationship, business partners, um, client to client to business owner, or business owner to client, it can undermine, once again, the trust, which undermines the safety. And so what we know about psychological safety is, next to our physiological needs, it is the second most important need that we have in the development in the move to developmental growth and what some people would call enlightenment, right? And sort of the progression to a more enlightened experience. If we don't have our physiological needs met and we don't feel safe, we cannot fathom um, higher levels of, we could, but like not fully immerse ourselves in higher levels of development and higher levels of productivity and activity and vulnerability, the things that really expand and create progress and innovation and creativity in our society, and actually end up connecting us and helping us to um, mitigate harm in a lot of ways. So my invitation to you is to really think about where you see this and where you are this, right? So where you see this, there's an opportunity to courageously call inside of those spaces. And where you are this, there's an opportunity to reflect, not to self-flagellate, not but to reflect and to look at, well, how can I then make my insides match my outsides and be congruent with my words and actions and do what I say what I'm going to do, or get in communication when I can't do it and then put in a structure so it doesn't happen again. How can I do that? And so that is our reflection of the week. And if you are interested, I do speak often about psychological safety in organizations and in communities. And so if you are thinking, this might be a good topic for our organization, then you can reach out to me at mindremappingacademy.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or any of the platforms, Facebook, Instagram. I'm available. Follow me on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe to the Black Mind Garden podcast. And so with that, I will bid you adieu for this episode. Please share this with someone that you think this would be helpful, would be useful. And once again, feel free to reach out to me on any of the platforms or go to mindremappingacademy.com and you can schedule a discovery call or brainstorm call if you're part of an organization to have me come and talk and delve a little bit more deeply. This is the area of expertise. How do you create psychological safety in the organization? I think that this is something that is an overlooked and under-recognized, but extremely important and um, impactful thing that we need to be having in our organizations. So with that, have a great rest of the day. And as always, stay empowered. We'll see you on the next